Hi everyone, my name is Ahmad Ashrafi. Today is one of my best friends from childhood, the tennis days, someone I know since maybe I was 4 or 5 years old, so our friendship goes back 30 plus years. And he's always been someone I admire, taught me a lot of things, beat me a few matches, and when I beat him once or twice, it made me feel really good because he was a really talented tennis player. So I'm very happy to have him here. Rafa, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ahmad. It's really cool to be here with you. I'm so glad of seeing what you've done, and this is one more accomplishment that is really inspiring. So happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And once you go through it, you have a different perspective. I've been fascinated with this perception perspective conundrum. And I think that something that you did, and definitely everybody that listens to this and sees this is interested in, is making a career change. And this is something that you went through, and maybe you can shed some light on what happened, what motivated to make a career change.
Yeah, I think I've gone through a couple of career changes. Starting from what you and I both did, growing up, being very involved in sports and taking tennis very seriously, and thinking that, at least on my part, that my life would be defined by that, and whatever I would do would be around tennis. To shifting into saying, going beyond that, and then in my case, I went into architecture. I studied architecture, graduated as an architect, and I started working as an architect. Then, to my next stage, and I can dive into that further, I started working in media, in advertising, and had a 10-year long career in that, with some sort of punctuated by some moments of entrepreneurship in certain areas. And then I decided to shift completely, and after and drop my career and look for a new career path. I decided to do an MBA, and that's part of what gave me sort of the insight into wanting to pursue a career in technology, and especially fintech. So I've had a couple of, 3 or 4 meaningful shifts in my career that there were tons of things that I thought I knew, which definitely weren't. So
Sure, sure. Well, that's admirable, and I think that something I wanna dive deeper is what you just said, that your identity was sort of based on what you did. So how did you determine it was the right time to switch, or what factors were like that determined that okay, it's my identity as an architect, or my identity was a tennis player, and now I'm in media, and now I'm an entrepreneur, now I'm an MBA student. What was the biggest thing that made motivation to change, and also what was something that you thought people should know before doing these things?
yeah, I think the what you mentioned about the identity being tied and linked kind of inextricably to what you think you're doing. I think more than for me, the more than the motivation, it's overcoming the barrier. And for me, it was, I think, the overcoming the barrier of the ego. You're defined by, the perception you have, I guess, in society, or how well you appear to be doing in a career or in a path you're taking. And giving that up in a sense, especially when you shift careers because you choose to, because you decide that you want to kind of go in a different direction, have a different challenge. The hardest thing to overcome was giving up, what I had already built up. I had a career where I was at a good position at one of the top media companies in Ecuador, in my country. Had the fortune of growing within it, and had many opportunities there. And deciding that, I'm going to drop that and literally become an intern somewhere else, and be nobody in another country or another industry. I think that's more than the motivation too, the challenge to overcome.
Well, so it's really like you were at the pinnacle of your industry, you were top gun, and then going back to zero or beginner stage. What was your biggest source of support? What did you think you needed, or was it something that you how do you overcome that?
Yeah. I had a great, I guess, motivation and one great support. So I'll start with the motivation. The motivation was um learning, to continuously be learning. I've always been really interested in technology, and very interested in, what technology um, can do, in a wide space. And what I thought that was most interesting to me in technology was the area of fintech, and being able to do technology go down to the sort of one of the more elemental things we do as humans, which is, transact, and share, store, uh, and move value, right? So for me, if I thought that finance, or actually, fintech was where technology would be most sort of impactful. And I decided that I wanted to learn about that. So that was my motivation, learning and continuously learning. And then, I really had a very strong, sort of source of support, which was my wife, that kind of uh, stopped me from, being tied to my ego, and, what are people going to think if I stop being, if I stop being tied to what I thought defined me as a person, which was my career and my position. And she was the one who actually told me, look, life is long. You have to keep learning and reinventing, and doing things that challenge you, like not being complacent, and not getting too comfortable. So those were the two, things that were most impactful.
Um, I love that because it's one of those things that the first thing that you mentioned was not being afraid to overcome the challenge of starting from zero. And then you said, uh, looking at something that made the most impact. So I believe that your identity was always to be impactful, not necessarily. And then the medium was being an architect, being a sportsman, being uh, in media, and now going into fintech. I think it's also about right product fit. I believe like right thing to do because it most identifies with who you what your why really, and I really rescue that. And then on the second side, I uh, I really admire what you said about your wife because in in the in the social media world, a wife is usually portrayed as the ball and chain, uh, the person that almost drives you. But in this case, not only there was a support, but also encouragement. So definitely, I wanna switch that in this narrative. Like wives are not balls and chains. They're really um, they're a great source of support. And maybe by yourself it would have been 10 times harder. Maybe you wouldn't even done it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So if you could go back in time, what would you have done differently? What can you say to people that are thinking of career changing? What's something that you can leave listeners to or viewers with that you'd say that I would have done differently?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because when you're thinking of career switches, I think that there's a part of you that says, I made a mistake before, but not necessarily, because many times, I think in most times, what you've done before, however different it is and what you do now, is what has given you the tools to be able to do this. So, as an example, for me, I realized quite early on in my career as an architect that it wasn't my calling. I admire and I admire the profession, and I admire architects. Um, because it's such sort of a vocational thing to do. You really have to love the design process and the hard process behind it. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily for me, but I did gain a ton of tools, and a specific way of thinking, a very sort of programmatic way of looking at things, the sort of the iterative culture of going back and doing things many times again and learning from what you've already done. So I think, and that discipline that going through such a challenging sort of program, like architecture was, gives you. And obviously, I would say, this is, I spent a bunch of years in that really I applied nothing of that, or don't apply much of that to my daily kind of life, but it did give me these elements that I mentioned, the discipline, the way of thinking. Then I moved into media. And again, that was something which I took in a lot. But to answer your question more specifically, when you're switching careers, I think it's important to take account of what you've done before, and how what you've done before is going to give you the tools to succeed going forwards. So, when we switch careers, many times we think of the blank slate, but it's not really a blank slate, right? I think more of it as a ladder or or as going up lungs. Not necessarily blank slate. You don't start from zero, you start from somewhere else. So being mindful of what you've gained and how what you've gained will help you going forward.
Oh my God, this is, I think, incredible. So I remember when you were in university, that was tough. There was a lot of work. And even if you don't apply architecture now, it gave you the skills. And the same thing goes with tennis. Like you're not a tennis player anymore, but it taught you life skills and life goals. And I think that having the courage to change your career is more like like you said, the ego portion is the hardest. But what you carry on from that is there's a lot more carry and benefit to changing your career because what you don't leave everything behind and there's no blank slate. So I think that's a very that's a great thing to take away. Maybe the last thing I'd like to ask you is, did you find any resources or books or media? What helped you during this transition in times of need? What was there that made uh, things clear?
Yeah. In terms of resources, one of the main resources was just reaching out to people in that space and that in the area where I wanted to go into. I had the fortune of going into a an MBA program at London Business School that had a ton of support and a ton of tools and a ton of people that were really open to talking to you about their career. So I spoke to a bunch of people in fintech. I spoke to a bunch of my colleagues that came from fintech, um, and I gained tremendous knowledge for it. Then, in terms of resources, kind of books, I read a really cool book which is called "What You're Meant to Do." Um, I think that's the title, and it's very much an exploration of what are the important things that you have to take into account when shifting career and when deciding what you want to do next, going beyond what the position or the title or the apparent value of what you're doing means, and thinking of what is it that you actually want to do on a day-to-day basis that you find satisfaction in. And also kind of then I read many sort of I heard a lot of podcasts, read a lot of blogs, and also something that I was really interested in is that in the concept of you're not. It's hard to find passion, or and this comes from the book that I read. What it really meant to do, which is it's hard to be passionate about something. People speak too much about find passion or find love in what you do. And I don't, in my opinion, that's a bit, naive. Or it's at the end of the day, a career is a job. It's what you get up and you do it most of the time when you're not enjoying it, and most of the time it's hard. And then you find pockets, sort of satisfaction that overcome, the hard work. So thinking about what you actually enjoy in the day to day, what gives you satisfaction, um, and where in your new path, your new career, could you find that? And how the overarching goal that you're reaching, that you're looking for in a career shift, can be is the end goal, but it's not the day to day. You're not gonna Every day is not gonna be just passion and enjoyment and fulfillment. You will get fulfillment at certain stages, but it'll mostly be really hard. So that's
I 100% agree, and this is something that I actually have a sort of a pet peeve with when you look at social media, especially, and maybe younger generations. They all say be passionate and of what you do and love what you do, and you won't work a day in your life. Once you, this is I thought I knew, like if you do what you love, you'll probably sit on the couch. Like you won't do anything. And you're right. It takes everything good takes hard work. And I like the fact of what is satisfaction, what makes you, what is pleasant, and I would add something that, what are you good at? Like, what are you valuable? I also did a transition in careers. I am an entrepreneur. I am an investor. And then I always think, okay, if I'm working on investing in real estate now, or investing in startups, or being part of a board, or any of those, or mentoring someone, my overarching uh, proposition is, am I providing value? Am I being valuable? If I'm valuable, I can go to sleep at night knowing that, okay, I did my work because I was valuable. So I completely agree with you that thinking that just being passionate about what you do and doing what you like is just the most naive and narrow-minded way to approach a career. So really, really value this conversation. I know a lot of people will value this too. Please come back whenever you want. As I said at the beginning, 30 years, I've seen so many changes, so many things, so many developments, and I'm very excited for the next step in your career. Please come back.
Ahmad, likewise, you've really built something really special. I'm happy to say that I'm not only a friend, but also one of your clients and investors, and I think that you've built it the right way. And I'm glad to share that you're sharing sort of experiences with a wider audience, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.